I had always dreamed of visiting Bluff Creek, the place where the famous Bigfoot video was filmed. Armed with my camera and a light backpack, I decided to walk the trails alone. The forest was calm, bathed in the orange tones of the sunset. The giant sequoias seemed like columns guarding an ancient temple, and the air was filled with that sweet scent of old wood. At first, everything seemed normal. My footsteps crunched on the dry leaves, and occasionally I heard the flap of a crow. But after a few minutes, I noticed something unsettling. Every time I took 3 steps, I heard 3 more behind me, the same rhythm. I turned, and there was nothing. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, or maybe an unusual echo created by the mountains. However, when I quickened my pace, the other sound also sped up. I stopped abruptly, and the entire forest went silent. Not a cricket, not a bird. Only the weight of my held breath. Then I heard it, a loud crack, as if something enormous had stepped on a branch behind me. I spun with the camera raised, but the lens only captured the mist between the trees. Suddenly, the forest erupted with a deep, grave growl that seemed to vibrate through the air. Fear drove me to run downhill, stumbling over roots and rocks. But whatever was following me ran too. Its steps were so heavy the ground shook. The echo of its pursuit thundered in my chest like a war drum. I fell to the ground, scraping my hands. When I looked up, I saw it. It was immense, over 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur that glimmered with the last rays of the sun. Its yellowish eyes locked onto mine. It could have destroyed me in an instant, but it didn't. Instead, it leaned toward me, so close I felt its hot breath mixed with a wild stench like wet animal and rotting earth. It remained like that for a few seconds, staring at me with an unbearable intensity. Then it let out a guttural growl, almost like a warning, and slowly backed away until it disappeared among the giant trunks of Bluff Creek. I stayed there, paralyzed, my heart racing and my hands trembling around the camera. When I reviewed the footage later, all I captured was the blurry shadow of something enormous vanishing among the trees. Today, every time someone mentions the Patterson-Gimlin video, I think of what I experienced. That forest still holds secrets, and I am one of the few who knows how real the terror of encountering Bigfoot face-to-face can be. I had always read about Bigfoot sightings in Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in Washington. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to camp there for a night, armed with my flashlight, a small tent, and a thermos of coffee. The air smelled of wet wood, and the wind made the tall branches creak as if the forest itself were whispering secrets. As night fell, I lit an improvised fire and sat listening to the sounds. At first, it was relaxing. Crickets chirping, the distant hoot of an owl. But past midnight, a strange noise woke me. At first, it was faint, like branches breaking, but soon it became clear. Footsteps, deep, slow, too heavy to be a deer. The fabric of my tent vibrated with each step. Summoning courage, I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it outside. That's when I saw it. A few meters away, barely illuminated by the trembling beam, stood a gigantic silhouette. Over 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a body covered in dark hair. Its eyes reflected the flashlight with a reddish glow, like embers burning in the darkness. My entire body froze. The creature took a step forward, and with a simple motion of its enormous arm, it struck the tent. everything collapsed. Bent poles, torn fabric, my body trapped in the chaos. I heard it toss my things aside, the thud of the thermos bouncing off a rock, and branches snapping like twigs. The sound was deafening, a contained violence in every gesture. I remained still, trapped under the fabric, silently praying it wouldn't touch me. My breathing mixed with the strong odor surrounding it, a wild stench like wet fur and rotting earth. The creature snorted near me, so loud that the canvas shivered from its breath. Suddenly, everything stopped. No more blows, no more steps, only absolute silence. I mustered the courage to lift the fabric and peek outside. What I saw froze me. My campsite was destroyed. The fire extinguished, poles bent, everything scattered as if a hurricane had passed through. But there was no trace of it, except for a series of enormous footprints in the damp soil, so fresh they still emitted vapor in the cold dawn. I stayed there, trembling, until sunrise. I never knew why it didn't attack me. Perhaps it only wanted to show its strength, to make it clear that the forest belonged to it. Since then, every time someone talks to me about Gifford Pinchot, I shudder, because I was there, and I know that in those mountains, you are never truly alone. That afternoon, I went for a walk alone along a rarely traveled trail in a forest I had always considered peaceful. The air smelled of fresh pine, and the mist moved among the trunks like a damp veil. The silence felt strange, because normally the birds never stopped singing there. That stillness sent chills down my spine from the very beginning. As I walked, I heard a heavy crunch behind me. I thought it was a deer, but the steps were too slow and deep. The ground vibrated slightly with each step. I stopped, and for a moment, the noise stopped too. The tension made me hold my breath. I cautiously turned my head, and through the fog, I saw a colossal figure, upright, covered in dark, shiny hair. It easily measured over 8 feet tall. Its arms hung almost to its knees, and its chest moved with a slow but powerful rhythm. I felt my heart pounding like a runaway drum. The creature watched me without moving, just breathing, and that deep sound filled the air with a strange echo. A strong odor, like damp earth mixed with rusty iron, surrounded me. I wanted to scream, but my throat didn't respond. Instinct told me not to run, that any sudden movement could be fatal. Suddenly, I heard a guttural sound that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't a roar or an animal scream. It was a hoarse whisper, distorted, as if trying to imitate human words. My mind refused to accept it, but it seemed to say my name in that rough, dragging murmur, impossible to fully articulate. The being raised a huge hand with thick fingers and dark nails and directed it toward the forest exit. I didn't feel threatened. It felt like a clear, almost paternal command. Go. I obeyed without thinking. I started walking backward, keeping my eyes on its glowing gaze. Then, when I felt far enough, I ran with all my strength, stumbling and gasping, certain it could catch me at any moment. Yet it didn't. When I reached the road, I collapsed, trembling, my chest burning. Minutes passed before I could catch my breath. I never returned to that trail, but since then, every night when I close my eyes, I relive that murmur that seemed to pronounce my name in a voice that was not human. And though no one believes me, I know that Bigfoot spoke to me.
Clara had always been skeptical about Bigfoot stories, but something drove her to explore Mount Rainier National Park, known for frequent sightings. That morning, carrying her camera and a light backpack, she walked among towering fir trees under a sky covered with gray clouds. The trail was quiet, too quiet, and every step she took made dry leaves crackle like a strange echo. As she rounded a bend, she saw something moving between the trees. At first, she thought it was a deer, but the figure was far too tall and upright. A chill ran down her spine. She raised her camera and focused, but the figure vanished behind a tree trunk, only to reappear seconds later, as if playing with her. Her heart raced and a deep whisper cut through the air. "Clara." There was no one else nearby. The voice was low, eerily human, and terrifying. Fear rooted her to the spot. Through the mist and shadows, Bigfoot revealed itself fully. Its dark fur blended with the dim light, and its eyes shone with unsettling intelligence. It didn't roar or lunge. It simply observed, studying her. Clara held the camera with trembling hands, unable to look away. The creature took a step forward, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. A deep sigh swept through the air, as if nature itself was calling her to understand something beyond her comprehension. Clara realized she was not facing a monster, but a guardian of the forest. Every tree, every shadow seemed to align with its presence, fear mixed with fascination. Slowly, she turned her camera and captured an image of Bigfoot before deciding to retreat cautiously. The creature remained for a moment longer, watching her, and then vanished into the mist, leaving behind only the echo of its sigh and the earthy scent of damp soil and leaves. As Clara returned to the main trail, her heart pounded, filled with a mix of awe and respect. Every snap of a branch reminded her that the forest held secrets few could comprehend. That experience changed something within her. She understood that nature had eyes, and in those eyes she had witnessed a silent guardian protecting its territory. Even when looking back at the photographs of that encounter, she could still feel the creature's presence, a reminder that some mysteries exist beyond what the mind can explain.
Since I was a child, I had heard stories about Bigfoot in Yosemite, but I never imagined I would face the creature in person. That afternoon, I decided to explore a rarely traveled trail near the cliffs of the valley. I carried my camera and a small backpack with supplies. The sun was slowly setting, casting golden and orange tones over the sequoias and cliffs. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. At first, everything seemed calm. My footsteps on the dry leaves made soft, crunching sounds, and every so often a bird would fly across the sky. But soon, I noticed something strange. Every time I passed a tree trunk, I felt a presence behind me. I couldn't see it, but something was following me, so silent that the usual forest sounds seemed to fade in its proximity. I tried not to think too much about it, blaming my imagination, until I heard a much louder crack, as if a huge rock had broken loose and tumbled down the slope. My heart raced, and I lifted my camera, aiming between the trees. There, in the deep shadows, I glimpsed a giant figure, standing upright, covered in dark, glossy hair. Its shoulders were broad, and the strength in its arms was evident with every movement. Before I could react, the creature vanished into the bushes, but the ground shook under its weight, and a deep, low growl echoed across the valley. Adrenaline made me run blindly,
stumbling over roots and rocks, sensing that I was not alone. Every time I turned, it seemed the shadow moved as well, always at the same distance, always watching. Finally, I reached a clearing near a cliff. My breathing was ragged, my hands shaking as I checked the camera. That's when I saw it again. Bigfoot was there, silent, watching me with deep, dark eyes that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. It didn't advance toward me, but I felt its power. It didn't need to attack to command respect. For several minutes, we stood face to face until the creature slowly turned and disappeared among the trees, leaving behind a humid air filled with a wild scent and the echo of a distant growl. I remained trembling, but with a strange feeling, fear mixed with fascination and a deep respect for that being who seemed to be the true guardian of Yosemite. When I finally returned to the main trail and saw the first lights of the city in the distance, I understood something. The forests hold secrets not meant to be discovered, and some encounters change the way we perceive the world forever. Since that day, whenever I speak of Yosemite, my heart remembers the shadow that followed me and the gaze I will never forget.